On February 14, 2025, a drone struck the roof of the largest movable structure ever built, a €1.5 billion steel arch covering the remains of the Chernobyl reactor. The hole it left was roughly 15 square meters. By November, the United Nations nuclear watchdog confirmed the structure had lost its primary safety functions, including the ability to contain radioactive material. This arch took 11 years longer than planned to build. 45 countries paid for it. It was designed to last 100 years. The estimated repair bill is €500 million. Ukraine is in the middle of a war. No repairs have begun. Stand at the perimeter and look at it. From a distance, it is exactly the building the world celebrated in 2016. A silver arch, 108 meters tall, spanning 257 meters, sitting over the wreckage of the Chernobyl reactor like a giant, sealed lid. From this angle, nothing has changed. The drone footage tells the truth. Up on the cladding there is a jagged tear, roughly the size of a room, with fire damage smudging the panels around it. That hole is the whole story. The largest movable land-based structure in history, engineered by French contractors, paid for by 45 countries, designed to outlast everyone alive today, and the United Nations nuclear watchdog has confirmed it is no longer doing what it was built to do. The numbers are the kind that should make this object unkillable. 31,000 tons of steel, a €1.5 billion price tag, inside a total shelter implementation plan of roughly €2.15 billion. Originally meant to be finished in 2005, actually completed in 2016, with handover to Ukraine in July 2019, 14 years late on a project the world could not afford to skip. It was designed for 100 years of safety. It lasted, in full working condition, fewer than 9. You are not looking at a building. You are looking at an assumption. They engineered this thing against earthquakes, against tornadoes, against a century of corrosion. They did not engineer it against a drone because in 2004, when the design was approved, nobody modeled the systematic targeting of nuclear-adjacent infrastructure as a feature of a modern war. They designed a 100-year structure for a world that did not survive the first decade. So how did it ever get this expensive in the first place? Go back to 1986. The reactor explodes. Soviet workers throw together a concrete shell in 6 months, using around 600,000 people, knowing it is temporary. Inside it, the molten core and an estimated 200 tons of highly radioactive material. The structure is called the sarcophagus. Nobody pretends it will last more than 20 or 30 years. Then the Soviet Union collapses, and the country that built the temporary fix stops existing before anyone has to deal with what temporary means. That is the original sin. Not a design flaw, a handoff. A 30-year structure left standing in a vacuum, in a newly independent country with no money to replace it, while the radioactive material underneath kept aging. By the time international funding and engineering finally caught up, the question wasn't build a better lid. It was build a structure that can survive long enough to take the old one apart. That is what the new Safe Confinement was for. People miss this. The arch was not the solution. The arch was the workshop. It was supposed to be the climate-controlled, radiation-sealed shell that would finally make it possible to dismantle the sarcophagus underneath, robotically, with human operators working from a shielded room. The plan included a heavy crane inside the arch built specifically to do that work. The arch's purpose was not to contain Chernobyl forever. It was to give engineers a place to finally finish what 1986 had only paused. To build it, they had to invent a new category of problem-solving. Radiation levels over the sarcophagus were too high to construct directly above it. So engineers built the entire arch on rails beside the reactor and slid it into position. The full slide took 15 days in November 2016. The structure is called moveable, not because anyone planned to move it twice, but because human bodies could not safely stand near its final destination long enough to build it there. That is the baseline level of difficulty this project was operating at before anything went wrong. Then count the delays. Originally targeted for 2005, pushed to 2013, then summer 2015, then autumn 2017, final commissioning and handover to Ukraine, July 2019. Every one of those slipped years was another year the sarcophagus aged without the tools to replace it. By the time the arch slid into place, the maximum assessed life of the stabilized sarcophagus had already been extended, with a deadline of 2023 to 2029. But here is the part that has to be said cleanly. It worked. The slide worked. The seal worked. The handover happened. By 2019 it was certified, and the crane inside began testing for the dismantling job nobody had ever attempted. For about 6 years, the structure was exactly what its designers promised. Quietly, expensively, doing nothing wrong. Then came February 14, 2025, around 1:50 in the morning. A Russian drone struck the new safe confinement. The breach in the inner and outer cladding measured roughly 15 square meters. Around 200 square meters of panels were damaged. 2 of the NSC's most important functions, containing radioactive material and enabling the dismantling of the original sarcophagus, were compromised in minutes. No radiation release, yet, but the margin had just collapsed. You might think this is the story of a megaproject that failed. It is not. This is the part where the case has to change shape. The International Atomic Energy Agency examined the structure. Their finding, repeated in their own statements through late 2025, is that the new safe confinement had lost its primary safety functions, including the confinement capability. Read that phrase again. That is the United Nations nuclear watchdog on the record about a €1.5 billion structure. And in the same assessment, no permanent damage to its load-bearing structures or monitoring systems. The engineering held. The arch is still standing the way it was built to stand. What failed was not the steel. What failed was the assumption underneath the steel. The assumption was that nuclear safety infrastructure, once built, operates in a stable world. That the political conditions that made 45 countries cooperate on a single arch in the early 2000s would persist long enough for the arch to do its job. The structure was designed against every threat from physics and time. It was not designed against the most common weapon in a 21st century war, because in 2004 that wasn't a weapon yet. That is the reversal. The story is not they built it badly. The story is they built it correctly, for a world that no longer exists. Now the trap. Preliminary technical assessments by the original contractors Bouygues and Vinci put repair costs in the order of €500 million. That is roughly a third of what the arch itself cost to build. Work needed to restore full functionality is projected to require completion by 2030. The repair crews face strict radiation exposure limits and will likely have to work largely through remote operations. Inside a building whose interior crane was damaged in the same strike. In a country at war. With international funding uncertain. Don't repair it and the calculus is worse. According to the assessments, failure to restore the NSC would seriously jeopardize its 100-year design life because of corrosion, undermining decades of international investment and creating environmental and safety risks. The arch will start eating itself from the inside out, while the radioactive material it was built to outlast keeps aging on a schedule nobody can argue with. And underneath, in the shadow of the breach, the real cost. The sarcophagus dismantling, the operational purpose of the entire arch, cannot begin. The whole point was to crack open the old shell inside a sealed environment. With the confinement function gone, doing that work would mean opening the most radioactive single structure on Earth inside a building that is no longer sealed to the sky. As one nuclear specialist put it, if there were to be some event inside the shelter releasing radioactive materials into the space inside the new safe confinement, because this facility is no longer sealed to the outside environment, there is the potential for radiation to come out. The crane that was supposed to do the work was hit in the same strike. So count what is sitting on this site right now. 200 tons of highly radioactive material. A sarcophagus that was never meant to last more than 30 years, now 39 years old, kept alive by extensions. A containment arch that can no longer contain. A €500 million repair bill in a country that cannot pay it. And a dismantling job that has been frozen indefinitely, because the workshop built to enable it has a hole in its roof. Stand at the perimeter again. From here, the new safe confinement looks exactly as it did in the photographs from 2016, when the world called it one of humanity's great engineering achievements. The hole in the cladding is not visible from the approach road. The 45 countries that funded it are now being asked to fund repairs that cost a third of what it cost to build. The sarcophagus underneath is older than most of the people who built the arch over it. The structure was designed to last 100 years. It has been broken for less than one. This is the part that should sit with you. Building the future is easier than maintaining it. Engineers can model wind, weight, time, and decay. They cannot model the assumption that the country they hand the building to will still be at peace when the maintenance bill comes due. The arch is doing exactly what the steel was designed to do. The world it was designed for is the part that did not hold.